Welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing the largest news story of mankind, of human history, possibly in the history of the Earth. I don't know. Let's see how far we get with extinction levels this time around. But definitely, we are going to, if any of us are able to look back at this, we are going to go, holy hell. That was one big explosion or implosion, possibly. Just bringing you articles, evidence, news, information gathering. Of course, there's a lot going on in the news cycle. Austin bomber apparently blew himself up. Young man was shot. Young unarmed black man was shot in Sacramento holding a cell phone because police are just so trigger happy that they can't, they just can't hold back long enough to figure out if somebody's holding a weapon or not. Truly disgusting. But we're going to go into some climate change news. This is from, this is recent, and I believe somebody sent this to me, maybe Todd sent this to me, but I also got it somewhere else. This is from Tuesday, yesterday. Shark Bay seagrass loss during ocean heat wave released up to 9 million tons of CO2, scientists say. A new study claims an unprecedented ocean heat wave responsible for wiping out a range of species in West Australian waters 7 years ago released huge amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, equivalent of up to the yearly output of 2 coal-fired power plants. During a 4-month period in the summer of 2010 through 2011, an extraordinary La Nina event and a particularly strong Leeuwin current combined to drive a 2 to 4 sea rise in the mean sea surface temperature in Shark Bay. The paper published in the journal Nature Climate Change found that seagrass cover had reduced by 20%, or about 1,000 square kilometers, when compared to records from 2002. The effect on marine life in the World Heritage listed area was total devastation, with mass deaths of sea animals, coral bleaching, and the loss of huge swaths of seagrass meadows. Edith Cowan University scientist Oscar Serrano said that 8,000-year-old seagrass meadows acted as a huge store for carbon dioxide, but when the heat wave struck these areas, an estimated 2 to 9 million metric tons of carbon dioxide was released into the atmosphere within 3 years. The seagrass meadows are known as blue carbon ecosystems because they store carbon dioxide in their soils, Dr. Serrano said. So when you have an event such as the losses at Shark Bay, you not only lose the seagrass as a way of removing CO2, but the sequestered gas is released back into the atmosphere during seagrass matter decomposition. Dr. Serrano said the worst case emissions from the seagrass loss was equivalent to the annual CO2 output of around 800,000 homes, 2 coal-fired power plants, or 1,600,000 cars. The seagrass recovery will take decades. Dr. Serrano said that the 2010 to 11 heat wave event could eventually result in up to 21 million metric tons of carbon dioxide being released in the atmosphere over 40 years, assuming none of the seagrass recovers. Seagrass is an organism that grows very slowly, and it takes ages to recover, so this can't happen in a couple of years. It will take decades. Recently, we went back there to assess the quality of the seagrass meadows, and basically it's all gone. You can only see the roots left after the erosion of the banks they grow in. More heat wave pain predicted. Dr. Serrano said it was also likely another ocean heat wave would occur before the seagrass could return to full health. The future is unknown always, but climate change is causing an increase in heat waves and other extreme events. So it's most likely we will have another heat wave like this, he said. And it's likely it will have severe impacts again, particularly in areas like Shark Bay, which are in the fringe zone between temperate and tropical areas. This is a very difficult problem to manage because climate change is happening on a global level. Dr. Serrano said transplanting more resilient species of seagrass was one measure that could be considered. It's sort of controversial and not much is known, but one possibility could be to transplant more tropical species in these temperate climates, he said, because they are better adapted to cope with heat waves and warm water. But Dr. Serrano said ultimately global action on climate change was key to ensuring the survival of seagrass meadows, namely through the reduction of greenhouse emissions. Alrighty. Moving on to Tim. I believe Tim sent this to me. This is interesting. This is from PR Web, but dated Wednesday, March 21st. 2018 hurricane prediction, strongest cycle in 70 years. As if last year was not strong enough. And I'm going to, before I even read this, say that over the next few years, I'm sure we're going to see a lot of, strongest hurricane cycle in 200 years, strongest hurricane cycle in 500 years, strongest hurricane cycle in, on and on and on. Because we're seeing, we were seeing 100-year floods and 500-year floods, and then 1,000-year hurricanes, and et cetera, et cetera. Global Weather Oscillations, GWO, was cited by news media as the only major, this is from January 18th, 2018, cited by news media as the only major hurricane prediction organization that correctly predicted the hyperactive 2017 Atlantic hurricane season from beginning to end and the destructive United States hurricane landfalls. The media also noted that when the hurricane season began last year, nearly every major weather agency predicted a normal 2017 hurricane season, but only Global Weather Oscillations Incorporated had an accurate forecast with a prediction for a destructive hurricane season with 16 named storms, 8 hurricanes, 4 major hurricanes, and 2 major impact hurricanes for the United States. I don't know if that was a prediction or what actually happened. It seemed pretty right on the money. GWO also predicted the United States would have 6 named storms, 3 hurricanes making landfall in 2017, and where they would occur. Just as predicted, the U.S. ended up with 6 named storms and 3 hurricanes. GWO predicted that the Florida Peninsula would break out of their 12-year hurricane drought with a major Category 3 to 4 hurricane making landfall on the south tip of Florida. GWO also predicted that Texas could break out of their 8-year hurricane drought with a landfalling hurricane just above Corpus Christi and a Category 1 hurricane striking the upper Gulf Coast. The 2017 landfalling hurricanes ended up being Harvey, Irma, and Nate. Professor David Dilley, Senior Research and Prediction Scientist for Global Weather Oscillations, prepares hurricane or tropical storm predictions for 11 zones, stretching from New England to Texas. By using climate pulse technology developed by Mr. Dilley, GWO can issue accurate zone predictions for release in January, well before the beginning of the hurricane season. Professor David Dilley states that the climate pulse technology model is based on natural rhythm cycles that control hurricane landfall cycles in the position of the Bermuda High Pressure Center. By utilizing this technology, GWO has issued the most accurate predictions by any organization during the past 10 years. The preseason zone predictions are so accurate, updates to the forecast are not required during the hurricane season, although GWO does offer special weekly hurricane outlook webinars and tracking webinars when a storm may threaten the United States. GWO is a working partner with the International Hurricane Protection Association. Wow. Fairly amazing. So here you go, prediction 2018 Atlantic Basin hurricane season. As predicted by Mr. Dilley and the GWO, last year, 2017, was the costliest year on record for the United States and one of the most destructive. Mr. Dilley says that some United States zones are currently in their strongest hurricane landfall cycle in 40 to 70 years. This is a natural climate pulse cycle that produced extremely active and dangerous hurricane conditions in some zones back in the 1930s and 1940s and is now repeating. Mr. Dilley predicts that 2018 will be somewhat of a repeat of 2017 and possibly another record breaker, although it will be strikingly similar to last year. Some hurricane landfalls will occur in different locations this year. You can expect 16 named storms, 8 hurricanes, 4 major hurricanes, potential for 4 United States hurricane landfalls, 2 of which will likely be major impact storms. There is the potential for 6 named storms making United States landfall. On the average, the entire Atlantic basin has 12 named storms, 6 hurricanes, and 2.7 major hurricanes. The reason for another destructive hurricane season is threefold. The ocean water temperatures continue to run warmer than normal across most of the Atlantic basin, red and orange in the graphic, and especially in the Caribbean region and the Atlantic near the United States. This is very similar to the ocean temperatures of last year, and this will again be conducive for tropical storms and or hurricanes forming and or strengthening close to the United States. Mr. Dilley also expects the Bermuda Azores high pressure center will again be in a favorable location, thus allowing more named storms to maintain strength or strengthen as they move from east to west across the Atlantic towards the United States. Then we come to the last item, El Nino. Excuse me. GWO's climate pulse technology model indicates that the tropical South Pacific Ocean temperatures, where El Nino events typically form, will warm significantly during late winter and approach weak El Nino conditions during the spring, much like the El Nino scare of last year. However, all years are not the same. Therefore, it could mature enough to form a very weak El Nino, but not strong enough to dampen the hurricane season. Historical records indicate that moderate to strong El Nino events dampen hurricane activity, whereas years with very weak El Nino conditions can be associated with active hurricane seasons if a climate pulse hurricane enhancement cycle is in place, and it is. So there you go. A scary prediction. Excuse me. And lastly, I believe Jeff sent this to me. This is short and scary. The sorry state of Earth's species in numbers from March 16th, 2018. As the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services prepares to unveil a thorough diagnosis of the health of the Earth's plant and animal species, this is what we already know. 2 species of vertebrate animals with a backbone have gone extinct every year on average for the past century. Scientists say Earth is undergoing a mass extinction event, the first since the dinosaurs disappeared some 65 million years ago. So 1 in a 65 million year event, and only the 6th in the last half a billion years. About 41% of amphibian species and more than a quarter of mammals are threatened with extinction. About half of coral reefs have been lost in the last 30 years. The global populations of 3,706 monitored vertebrate species, fish, birds, mammals, amphibians, and reptiles, declined by nearly 60% from 1970 to 2012. 60%. In 42 years. 25,821 species of 91,523 assessed for the 2017 Red List update were classified as threatened. Of these, 5,583 were critically endangered, 8,455 endangered, and 11,783 vulnerable. African elephant numbers dropped to 415,000 in 2016, down about 111,000 over 10 years. There are an estimated 8.7 million plant and animal species on our planet. This means about 86% of land species and 91% of sea species remain undiscovered. Of the ones we do know, 1,204 mammal, 1,469 bird, 1,215 reptile, 2,100 amphibian, and 2,386 fish species are considered threatened. Also threatened are 414 insect, 2,187 mollusk, 732 crustacean, 237 coral, 12,505 plant, 33 mushroom, and 6 brown algae species. Annual economic losses as a result of deforestation and forest degradation alone may be as high as $4.5 trillion. I think that's more money than like all economies combined or something like that. I don't know. It's a lot of money. The conference of the UN's Convention on Biological Diversity agreed in Nagoya, Japan in 2010 on a 20-point plan to turn back biodiversity loss by 2020. How's that going? The plan's so-called Alki biodiversity targets include having the rate of habitat loss, expanding water and land areas under conservation, preventing the extinction of species on the threatened list, and restoring at least 15% of degraded ecosystems. I imagine that 20-point plan is not happening, not going very well. That's all I have for this particular video. If you've noticed, I've trying to up my video production, trying to get out a couple of short videos a day instead of one longer video, and trying to keep things a little more concise. As you all know too, there's like a kind of a widespread YouTube crackdown on some sites talking about certain things, and I believe that there's just widespread slowing of traffic to certain sites, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Some sites are getting strikes or having, lots of problems staying alive. So far, I haven't experienced anything overtly crazy, but I do notice that my views will kind of stop for a while. I know that people are watching my videos because they're commenting. So like through the whole day, like people will be commenting like all day long. And sometimes I'll be, going back and forth with people, but my view count will just kind of die. It'll just stop. So that's an interesting phenomenon. Other than that, I've had quite a few people subscribing. I don't know if you're coming over from the older channel, if just new people are coming onto the channel, but thank you and welcome to this channel. I appreciate your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. As always, I will be back shortly with another video. Peace.